Parenting can be a roller coaster of emotions, but it doesn't have to be a constant struggle. At Positive Parenting Solutions, they offer a roadmap to transform your family dynamic and create a more peaceful home environment. Their proven techniques empower parents to confidently navigate challenges and connect with their children on a deeper level. From managing temper tantrums to fostering open communication, they provide practical solutions that work. Join a community of parents who have experienced the transformative power of positive parenting. Click on their show notes today to learn more about and watch an exclusive 60-minute webinar on positive parenting. Welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. I'm Lori Groh, your host, mental health therapist, and practice owner. Each month, we'll showcase a central theme and provide weekly practical hacks, inspiring interviews, and valuable advice from wellness professionals. Our aim is to help you streamline your wellness and mental health journey. So let's start the show. Hi, welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Today we have Amanda Lowe with us, a therapist at Shoreside Therapies. She specializes in identity development, college students, academic and career-related stressors, and transitions and adjustments. I want to welcome you today, Amanda. Looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you, Lori, for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. Hello, everyone.
I want to hear a little bit, Amanda, about school stress, social anxiety, things that come up at the beginning of the school year. What is stress? How does somebody know they are stressed? We can talk about how somebody can manage that stress.
School has only been in for 1 week, and I've already had students bringing in topics related to stress. And just for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to keep it pretty brief because if we dive into the literature, there's just so much that we can expand on, right? There is no doubt that school, whether you're in middle school, high school, college, it could be a really high pressure time of life. And so because of this, students often experience stress. Now, we think about stress as anything related to physical or mental response to some sort of external event or stimuli. For example, preparing for an upcoming test can be something that prompts stress. Now, stress can actually be something that is quote unquote good because it motivates us to focus on our assignments, or it motivates us to sit down and really focus on studying for an exam. We have two different types of stressors. We think about it as acute versus chronic stress. Now, acute usually includes really high levels of stress, but that only lasts a couple of days. So think about maybe today is Tuesday and your exam is Friday. You're feeling really high levels of stress because you have to study for your exam. But once you are done with that exam on Friday, your stress kind of dissipates. And then we think about chronic stress. Now, chronic might include lower intensity of stress in the moment, but it lasts for several weeks. Think about being or experiencing stress at a job that prolongs. And now that might influence other mental health related concerns. It might turn to depression or a diagnosable anxiety disorder. And that's just the difference between acute versus chronic stress.
I just want to highlight stress has to do with the external environment, right? And when we think about anxiety, there might be stress that leads to anxiety, but stress really has to do with the environmental challenges or expectations in our external world. So I love that you're letting people know the difference between that because it can be a bit confusing.
Being able to properly identify what it is that you're going through will help you manage and navigate the stressors in a healthier way, right? Thank you for bringing that up, Lori. That gives us a perfect segue to talk about some ways students can manage stress as they prepare for this upcoming semester or school year ahead. The first thing I have in mind is really prioritizing diet, sleep, and physical activity. These are the top 3 pillars to live a healthy life. Create a consistent 8 hours of sleep, creating a consistent night routine, making sure that you eat at least 3 meals, adding variety into your meals, and making sure that you at least get some movement in. That's going to be really helpful. If you take care of yourself in these areas, other areas of your life will go pretty well. The second thing that I can think of is making time to do fun things that refreshes you. And then the third one that I think of is to journal and reflect on how you are doing, being intentional, checking in with yourself. You might notice your body needing extra sleep or feeling a little tense and you need to do some stretches, right? Journaling and checking in with yourself might be helpful. Another thing that people hear too often is engaging in self-care. Now, I like to think about self-care as maybe going to the nail salon and spending $60 and getting my nails done. And that's definitely self-care. But I also think self-care can include doing unfun things like making sure you get your homework done or studying for an upcoming exam. Doing these unfun things can help alleviate stressors. And once that stressor is alleviated, you can actually do things you enjoy. So once you're done with these unfun things, you can go out for a walk or enjoy a nice meal with a friend or play some video games or whatever you like to do. I think about engaging in meditation or mindfulness practices to relax your mind and body. Our website has resources you can look into to improve or do mindfulness the right way. And then lastly, I think about finding or spending time with friends, creating a community of people that you trust will support you during tough times. So those are just some things that I have in mind in terms of managing your stressors on the day-to-day.
Yeah, I love that. Those are all really good tips. If we aren't getting rest, movement, and eating healthy or healthy-ish, our body is going to suffer, and that's going to make the stress. And a lot of times those things can play into themselves, create that snowball effect. I also like that distinction between self-care of getting our nails done, which is really awesome, but thinking about what's actually taking care of yourself. Does getting that assignment done ahead of time, does that make a difference as far as how you feel for the rest of the day in general, right? Like that stress of I have to get something done and it's next week that it's due. We're going to have that stress probably at least this level for that whole week. It does dissipate if you do it sooner, but I understand for a lot of people, procrastination can be a big thing preventing them.
I see that with my college students, right, Lori? Like a lot of my college students, I think they have this belief that if they put off something or they avoid something, they will feel better in the moment. But actually, what that does is that just amplifies their stress. And so, what I always recommend is maybe what do you need to do to stay focused and actually do the hard things? Maybe on that day. So you're not prolonging stress. Once you're done, you can enjoy different things like shopping or scrolling through your phone, right? A lot of times my students confuse that. I always encourage, what does delayed gratification look like instead of instant gratification?
Yeah, it can be easier to say, I don't want to do that, but it doesn't get rid of the stress. I want to hear a little bit about social anxiety that relates to school, because I'm imagining you're seeing this quite a bit as well. With the start of the school year, a lot of people are having more stress about social engagement and starting school.
I see that quite a lot, especially in the younger folks from middle school to high school, especially first year college students. Typically, what I see with these students or these clients is that they often worry about how others might perceive them, or they fear that others might be scrutinizing them, right? And so I just want to the audience, if that's something you experience, you're not alone. There's a reason why my job exists, and there's a reason why there's criterias that people can meet in the DSM-5 to be diagnosed with social anxiety, is because it happens all too often. If you experience a fear that others are scrutinizing you or others are perceiving you, maybe typically more in a negative way, that might be an indicator that you do have social anxiety. So I have a couple of things that could be helpful if you do find yourself often worrying. And so I think the first thing that I typically share with my clients is to validate your emotions. It's important to allow yourself to feel the way you feel. Now, feelings are just feelings, and they do not define who you are. Taking time to validate those emotions are going to be helpful. The second thing that I think is to be kind to yourself. And so you might be critical of yourself. You're constantly maybe engaging in negative things that I hear often are, why do I sound so weird? What if this person thinks I'm really odd? We just get stuck in our head. We ruminate on these negative thoughts. And the thing is that these negative thoughts they perpetuate our emotions. So they will amplify the anxiousness that we feel when we're in conversations, right? And so what I always recommend is maybe try to challenge some of those thoughts. It might be helpful to use positive affirmations. So instead, you might say something like, I'm feeling quite nervous. That owns your emotions and your feelings. But then you can say, but I'll get through this, right? Even if it's difficult. So I think that's a more realistic way to approach a situation when you're feeling nervous and meeting new people.
I like that you're not denying the reality. So sometimes that can be part of therapy too, right? Where somebody thinks that they have to lie to themselves in order to not feel that feeling. In all actuality, acknowledging it and then adding something to that thought can be really helpful. Like, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling nervous. And at the same time, I'm going to get through it. It will only be 20 minutes. Things that are actually real that somebody can say to themselves to give them a boost of feeling a little better. It's not necessarily you want to eliminate feelings, but how do we make it feel more manageable?
What I notice with a lot of my clients are that they tend to catastrophize their thoughts in those moments of high anxiety that just perpetuates these emotions. Zooming out and noticing that even though this is a really tough moment, even though you have all of these thoughts going through, that you will survive these thoughts. Right? You'll survive these moments. If you are someone that feels really nervous, preparing a little bit in advance might be helpful. So I think about creating scripts of common questions or phrases that you can use when you feel nervous or when you do not know how to carry on a conversation. These scripts could come in handy. The last thing that I have to say with this part is to remind yourself that you're in a new environment. Other people probably feel just as anxious as you do. So I encourage you to build the courage to initiate conversations, as this can be the start of a really good friendship. And so it really takes time and exposure for one to feel less socially anxious. But just know that in order to get past that, you have to get through that initial hump, right?
Yes, I like that idea too of having a script, having some questions you can ask in those moments when you're feeling that way. It could even be those icebreakers that sometimes we joke about are annoying. It doesn't matter because really the whole purpose is to break the ice. It does allow for that next stage in the conversation. And it gives you something. It gives you something to take your mind off of you. And the more that you're paying attention to the other person, it can move that conversation in a better direction. Amanda, I like that you talked about it being pretty normal to feel that anxiety, right? It seems as though almost everybody has a little bit of it, at least when they're first meeting somebody. They're going to feel that anxiety, or first day of school or the first week of school. Anxiety is going to be higher. Everything's new. People are new. Is there a first step to overcome some of that social anxiety?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lori. I think about going back to basics, right? I work with younger kids as well from like ages 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And what I always recommend for those individuals who's really socially anxious, the first one might be role playing. You might role play with a trusted friend or family member. Just introduce yourself. That gets you practicing. Once you practice more, you get the hang of how do you introduce yourself? How do you talk about yourself? That adds a layer of, I think it might be important to do a little bit introspection on who you are. So you know how to introduce yourself when someone asks you a really simple question of, what do you like to eat? What do you like to do for fun? Sometimes people get stuck because they're not sure how to respond and how to answer that. So I think role playing, knowing yourself, what are attributes of who you are, what are strengths and hobbies can help. I also teach a Master's of Behavioral Health Psychology program at a local college. And what I always tell a lot of my college students is, even though I'm on a teaching side, I get just as nervous of meeting my students. I'm fully aware of what my students might be thinking or perceiving of me. My biggest fear is my students might think I'm incompetent. I don't know what I'm talking about. That the same goes in therapy. And I think that hopefully that just normalizes that everyone experiences a little bit of anxiety regarding what others perceive.
Yes, it is normal. Sometimes even saying that can be helpful, like you did with your students. Oh, I'm always nervous on the first day or something like that, because everybody feels that way. And that's a way
Yeah.
to connect and unify. It's a
Right.
pretty common experience.
When I have students prepare for a presentation, sometimes we take things a little bit too serious. And I get it that there's a time and a place for it. What a lot of CBT and DBT therapists typically recommend is use a little bit of humor. Be honest
Mhm.
with how you're feeling. Standing in front of a classroom and you're getting ready to present and you're finding yourself stuttering, that might be an indication that you're feeling anxious. So you could really just use a little bit of humor, bring light into the
Yeah.
situation, and say something along the lines of, "Oh, I notice I'm stuttering and I'm feeling a little
Yeah.
nervous." People would understand where you're coming from. I don't think anyone would be scrutinizing you for being honest with how you're
Right.
feeling in that moment.
The more that you're doing it, the more you're realizing, okay, even if I mess up, whatever, we move on. No big
Mhm.
deal. I'm learning just like everyone else is learning.
Mhm.
And using some of those statements can help us get through those moments. So I want to hear a little bit of your take on imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure. Imposter syndrome sometimes is better known as like imposter phenomenon, really, since it's because it's not a formally recognized clinical diagnosis. And so depending on who you talk to, they use imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon. I usually just shorten and say imposter feelings, right? And so what it is really, it is that when high achieving individuals feel that they have not earned their achievements and they believe they are a fraud only waiting to be found out. So hopefully that makes sense. These feelings and these thoughts can contribute to people's anxiety and overall well-being. I see that often with my college students. I see it especially with advanced degree students, people in master's programs. They often feel these feelings a lot. People who experience imposter, they typically wrestle with thoughts that they do not deserve to be where they are, that they're incompetent, and that others are more capable than them. I think you can probably understand how detrimental that could be to one's confidence and one's self esteem. And that really inhibits performance with academics.
And it does tend to increase as somebody starts moving up as far as their career or their successes. It tends to be even more intense.
Yeah, athletes, musicians, celebrities, right? They also experience imposter too. And so, even if we think about the greatest academic or the greatest actor, actress, even they experience imposter. So, I hope that normalizes and that gives us permission to feel these feelings. I think that's a good segue to think a little bit about what are some ways that we can overcome imposter feelings. The first thing is to celebrate your successes, whether they're big or whether they're small. Celebrating these achievements can serve as a reminder that you are capable of doing anything that you commit to. I always say allow yourself to accept positive affirmations and validations from others. I don't know about the audience that is listening, but I grew up in an Asian American culture where we're taught to be humble and to dismiss the validations from other people. In some ways, I understand from the angle and perspective of humility and making sure that we never become too overly confident because we need to never be complacent. But I also understand from an angle of how detrimental that could be. We can be quick to dismiss these, but over time, it inhibits our belief in ourselves and what we are capable of. So, what I always recommend is slow down, be attentive to how you respond to yourself and how you respond to others. Cultivating self compassion is crucial. Show grace to a friend of yours, or you're empathetic to a classmate for being sick and not being able to make it to class. I hope that you are also able to extend that same kindness to you. And then the last thing I have to say in terms of navigating imposter and how to overcome it is to do the best that you can to let go of perfectionism. Reevaluate what your expectations are of yourself. Ask yourself if you are being realistic or idealistic. Letting go of perfectionism does not mean you are giving up or that you're not striving for excellence. I want to make that very clear. It just simply means that you are readjusting your expectations, right? So that you can feasibly focus on your progress.
I like that idea of focusing in on progress, right? Because that helps with our expectations. Are they more in that realm of being idealistic versus realistic? Because we might have an idea of how we want to perform. Maybe it takes years to get to that point, right? So does that mean that all that work in between is not good? Probably not, right? All of that work gets you to that point. And If we
Mhm.
focus in on how am I progressing, that's something that is in our control. How we measure ourselves, that really matters, and how we feel about ourselves. Putting our esteem into those categories, much more realistic and much more centered
Mhm.
into ourselves and our progress. Is it that
Mhm.
we're measuring ourselves against somebody that's been in the field for 20, 30
Mhm.
years?
It's not as binary as we
Right.
say it is, right? I even tell my young kids that I work with, practice does not make perfect. Practice actually makes progress. Being able to reframe and shift the way that you look at your performance, where you are at, is going to be really helpful.
I do like that idea
Yeah.
of practice makes progress. I might use that one.
Practice makes progress,
Yeah.
not perfection. Yeah.
Amanda, before we end, I'm curious, how does somebody know if they should seek out support and reach out to a mental health therapist? What kinds of things should they look out for? What are some signals?
As mentioned earlier, returning to school, preparing for school, no matter which state you're in, it influences high levels of stress. I think about being in therapy in like multiple ways. I don't think there's ever a right time or a wrong time to be in therapy. I could be doing fine and life is pretty good, but I still want to just check in with the therapist and wanting to just process my emotions for preventative care. That's totally appropriate. It might be helpful for you to reach out for support or for mental health counseling if you notice some of these symptoms. One might be if you're constantly engaging in negative self talk, that might be an indicator that it's important to process through those emotions and those thoughts because those thoughts again perpetuate those emotions and those emotions influences the way you behave. Being able to recognize these thoughts and shift these thoughts, it could be really helpful, and a mental health professional can really be someone to help you guide these thoughts. Another one is if you find yourself unable to enjoy the small things in life, maybe things that used to be exciting and fun for you are no longer as enjoyable. I think that also is a sign that you should reach out for help. Maybe if you experience stress that manifests itself physically, I think about if you're experiencing frequent headaches and migraines and you're typically a pretty healthy adult or individual, I think that might be a sign of heightened anxiety that's influencing those physical symptoms. If you're feeling nausea or constant tension in your body, so much more, right? Anything that manifests itself physically would be a good time for you to reach out for help. If you're having difficulty caring for your basic needs, like I talked about earlier, those three pillars to a healthy life. If you're not sleeping well, if you find yourself not eating well, if you're binging, if you're restricting, whatever that might be. And then if you're also not engaging in as much physical activity, if you're overly working out, or if you're not working out at all, or if you're not moving, I think those are signs as well that maybe there is something going on mentally that would be good if you were to get support from a mental health therapist. If any of the things that we talked about today resonates with you at all, I hope you know that you're not alone. We, as mental health professionals, including myself, are here to support you and partner with you in finding the best tools and strategies to help you have a successful year ahead.
That sounds wonderful. And Amanda, people can reach out to you right through our website at shoresidetherapies.com. And they can email you as well. All your information is there on the
Yeah.
website. I will actually put that in the show notes so people can just go ahead and click on that if they would like to set up an appointment with you. Also offer free consultations. If somebody is not sure if they want to do therapy, but thinking maybe I should, that can also be a great thing for somebody so that they can get to know you a little bit more. You can get to know them before making that initial appointment.
Yes, correct.
Awesome.
Thank you, Lori.
Yes, it was great talking with you today.
Bye, Lori.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today on the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Remember, your well-being is a priority, and we're here to help support you every step of the way. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring content on health and wellness. You can also join our Facebook group to connect with Wisconsin wellness providers by clicking the link in our show notes. Take care of yourself and remember that your well-being is a journey, not a destination. We look forward to you joining us again next time on the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Until then, stay well and stay inspired.